Hey, what's up there, YouTubers? It's me again, Brian, aka Gamer55551, and I am back with a My 2 cent Nintendo/gaming video for this week, for the week of April 12th through the 18th, where I take a look at some of the stories and give you my thoughts and my opinion. And we have actually about, there we go. We actually have about 6 stories to cover. Normally I would cover 5, but this one recently just popped up and I thought it was worth taking a look at and that has to do with the situation in regards to the PlayStation 5, from some of the announcements to possibly a price point that, depending on your view, may or may not sit well with a lot of people. We also have a report about the update 10.0 for the Nintendo Switch that apparently could hint to a possibility of a new Switch model, whether it's a hardware revision or whether it's the rumor Switch Pro or Switch.to. We'll have a look at that one as well. We've also have a report about a rumor about several Final Fantasy VII games, not the Final Fantasy Remake, but supposedly some games that took place within the Final Fantasy VII universe could be making their way over to the Nintendo Switch, which is considered, this one's considered rumored for now. We also have reports about Resident Evil 3 in terms of, and Resident Evil in general, in terms of not only is Resident Evil 3 seem to be doing alright though, but reports about the possibility that they might remake Resident Evil 4, and some information possibly about Resident Evil 8. And then of course we have information about the ESRB in regards of not only are they going to be in the same situation as the CERO is in Japan, but also information in regards to the whole loot box situation that they have done. And of course we're also going to talk about Hatred, a controversial game released back in the PC that was known for a lot of its shock values and all that stuff, and was one of the few games that got, I think that is well known, at least as far as I'm aware of, that got the AO, the adult only rating. And it seems as though, unless this is being read the wrong way, unless there's something that has changed that I'm not fully aware of, could be making its way over to the Nintendo Switch, which would be pretty surprising to see something like this happen, although I do think there may have been some caveats in order for this game to even remotely come to the Nintendo Switch. But before we get started, we'll get started with a quick rundown on the quick My 2 cent part. And before, these are stories that kind of caught my attention, but not in the way as the 6 that I am bringing up. We do learn, obviously, Nintendo Switch has been updated to the 10.0. Some of the new features is changes to like the news part, to sort of rebutting the maps on your Joy-Cons or Pro Controller, all that stuff. But there is one of the rumors that's been catching some people's attention. I'm going to get to that in part 5 of that video, though. We learned that one of the voice actors who did the voice behind Peppy from the Star Fox 64 games and other games, I believe Soldier from Half-Life, unfortunately has passed away this week due to complications with the coronavirus as well. I mean, very sad indeed, because I remember his famous lines, the famous do a barrel roll. I'm sure most of us remember that. I do want to send my regards out to his friends and family out there. We will miss you, though. I think definitely, especially when doing the voice of Peppy from Star Fox 64, a game I remember from my childhood, though. We also learned that basically that World War Z is coming to the Nintendo Switch, with a Game of the Year coming in May. So it's kind of interesting that game is coming over. We've later learned that Saber Interactive will be handling the Switch port, though. We don't have a launch date for the Switch version at this time. All we know is that the Game of the Year edition is coming to the Nintendo's. Game of the Year edition is coming out, in May for the PS4 and Xbox One, and more than likely PC. No word if this will be coming to the Nintendo Switch or anything like that, but personally, if they're going to bring that game over to the Nintendo Switch, I think it's probably best to bring the Game of the Year edition with all the content and so forth. Not only that, we learned that Crysis, a game that is by many viewed as a heavily graphically demanding game, and a game that has also earned the meme of "can this run Crysis" or anything like that. I remember them saying that about Witcher 3 to be exact. Is also being remastered. Not only is it coming to the PC, the first one though, not only is it coming to the PC, but also PS4, Xbox One, and yes, even the Nintendo Switch is going to get a version of Crysis coming to the Nintendo Switch. As with World War Z, Saber Interactive is handling the remaster version. And one interesting comment that has caught some people's attention is to mention that, and if I could be saying this wrong, that software ray tracing will be in it. Now, we've heard this name before, and we've seen that there are going to be a lot of games that will use ray tracing, for example. Right now, there's no word if this is just a typo or if they're just referring to the other versions and not the Nintendo Switch, but many assume that when they mention the ray tracing part, that they're also referring to the Switch version as well, which, if that's true, if this is true that they're bringing this ray tracing to the Nintendo Switch, it would be really interesting to see how it was able to be pulled off, not to mention how it would look like when compared to the other versions. But regardless of whether that feature is in this Crysis or not for the Switch, it's still coming to the Nintendo Switch. We also learned that Bandai Namco is going to bring Jump Force under the name Jump Force Deluxe, which is sort of like a complete or Game of the Year edition. That's the fighting game that is coming to the Nintendo Switch, although there are some who feel the game sort of got mixed response, and some people claim it was a bad game, but supposedly it did well in terms of sales-wise. So whether you think the game is good or not, who knows, but either way, they're bringing that to the Nintendo Switch. We also learned about SpongeBob SquarePants Battle for Bikini Bottom Rehydrated. Does have a launch date. At least for now, it's pointing towards if I'm reading this correctly, a June 23rd launch date though. And supposedly that's for every platform, although there are claims that they mentioned that the Switch version will come later, but last time I checked, according to Amazon, they have it set for June 23rd, just like the other versions are. So we'll see if that still sticks or not, but either way, we have a launch date for that game. I'm going to try that one out. I never played it before when it came out back in the days of the Xbox, PS2, and GameCube era, but I've heard some good things about it. Some call it the best SpongeBob SquarePants game out there. Others believe it's one of those licensed games that were done right, though. And last but not least, we have, unfortunately, several events have been canceled because of the coronavirus situation. The first one, obviously, is Gamescom 2020 has now been canceled. However, they are now going to do a digital event for that instead of the live event. This has to do with supposedly Germany has started put out a ban in terms of large gathering because of the whole coronavirus situation. So while it's disappointing we're not going to see a live event, it looks like GameCon is going to go on, but in a different capacity, a digital event. However, the San Diego Comic-Con, as of right now, has been canceled, and yeah, that's kind of a bit of a disappointment for a lot of people who are looking up for that event, though. We don't know if they're going to do a digital one like Gamescom is, but it looks like either way, this year, it's not going to happen, though, which, while disappointing, it's not all that shocking considering that we've seen a lot of events have either been canceled or they have to do a digital event because of the whole coronavirus situation. It's going to be interesting to see what happens next year, if these events will still happen or we're going to see them in a different capacity or not. But either way, where it stands, San Diego Comic-Con's not happening this year, though. Okay, with the quick My 2 cent part now done, we'll get started off with our first story, and this one has to do with the ESRB, or the Entertainment Software Rating Board. Now, as I mentioned last week in the video, in my 2 cent video, there were reports that came out and was confirmed that the CERO, this is the rating board system in Japan, unfortunately has decided that they were going to shut down, I believe, throughout the month of April due to the whole coronavirus situation. And this led to some questions of whether or not the PEG, the rating board in Europe, or the ESRB here in America, are they going to be impacted as well? Well, apparently the ESRB has responded to this, and it looks like, despite what's going on with the whole situation with the coronavirus, it looks as though it's still going to be business as usual, but obviously they may just take the approach of, the work at home or anything like that. In an article from Nintendo Life, again, links will be in the description, it reads that ESRB and the PEGI will continue to assign ratings remotely, thanks to a good deal of advanced planning. It reads, quote, "If you're wondering what's going on with the classification board across the world now that CERO in Japan has been temporarily closed, it's business as usual. An update from IGN reveals that the ESRB in America has been working from home in recent weeks. So far, it has no issues assigning ratings remotely." The official statement reads, quote, "Thanks to a good deal of advanced planning since March 16th, the ESRB has been operating remotely due to the COVID or coronavirus outbreak. We have seen no delays in assigning ratings. We will continue to assign ratings remotely for as long as required. Over in Europe, the European Games Rating Agency, PEGI, is also working remotely. The impact of the results measure has been minimum." According to the statement, they said, quote, "In short, yes, we are currently working remotely with minimum impact on our operation. When the situation started to unfold across Europe a couple of weeks ago, we quickly found a way to continue our daily operation by working remotely. Given that the PEGI in Brussels works with 2 independent administrators that are located in the Netherlands and the United Kingdom, and they deal with publishers all over the world, that we do not have to meet in person, cooperating remotely has always been part of our daily route, but now it's happening from home instead of different offices. We informed the companies using the PEGI system that until local authorities announce a change to the current measures, we will be working like this. But until now, the impact of the pandemic and the resulting measures have been minimum." The article concludes that unless something major happens or there is a problem on the publisher or developer end, games in these regions will continue to be rated. So in other words, it seems that despite the whole situation with the coronavirus, it doesn't look like the ESRB or the PEG have been impacted or negatively impacted in the way the CERO is, though. Obviously, they're going to have to operate a little bit differently because of the whole situation with the coronavirus, but it means that there is a good chance we probably won't see the kind of delays that, if I'm reading this correctly, the kind of delays that Japan's probably going to go through because the CERO has been closed for the time being, I believe, throughout the month of April, though. So, in a way, for us here in the US or in Europe, though, that's probably a good thing. That means that a lot of the games some of the games out there will still meet their release date probably, compared to where some of the games in Japan probably are going to miss their release date in that part of the world. So great that is the case, though. Obviously, the whole working from home, working remotely stuff is probably going to still be with us for a while until we're at a situation with the coronavirus where it won't be as bad as where we are right now. But for now, obviously, they are working like this, at home, remotely, and all that stuff. But despite that, it looks like the ratings will continue, which means that there is a good chance we won't see the kind of delays that, as I mentioned earlier, like we're seeing in Japan, unless the developers or the publishers on their side decide to delay the game, like we saw with Sony did with The Last of Us 2, where they delayed it indefinitely from its original May release date because of the whole coronavirus situation, or what we saw earlier in, I think in February, where Virtuos, the studio behind several Switch ports, that basically had to close the studio down for a bit because of the whole coronavirus situation, which led to the delay of the release of the Switch version of the Outer Worlds, which now is aimed for, if I'm saying this correctly, I think it's a June 3rd or June 23rd launch date, sometime in June. I apologize if I got the date wrong, anything like that. So on this part, though, it looks as though the ESRB and the PEG doesn't seem to be impacted on the same level as the CERO is, though. So obviously it means, barring any major issues with the publishers and developers, it seems the games will continue to be released in those regions. So great for here, though. It is unfortunate for those in Japan. Obviously, they're going to have to wait a little bit longer because of the whole situation with the CERO. Continuing with the ESRB, it does seem as though that they have, at least to some degree, taken some actions in terms of the whole loot boxes or microtransactions, although I don't know how much of an impact this will have it anyway. In an article from GameSpot, it reads that, quote, excuse me, the Entertainment Software Rating Board will now display if a game has in-game purchases with random elements like loot boxes in their rating. In the blog that accomplished the new policy, the ESRB notes that while it begins label titles with in-game purchases back in April 2018, it has made a decision to note these elements due to the research that suggests that parents are more concerned about randomized in-game purchases than other types. The blog also noticed that the ESRB felt that labeling these games with terms like loot boxes were insignificant because there are many other mechanics for randomized such items, including prize wheels or item packs. By using the general term, the ESRB says that new in-game purchases, including random elements, notice will effectively communicate the presence of these possible objectable elements to parents and consumers. This announcement comes as governments around the world have begun to consider or implementing legislation aimed at curtailing loot boxes or other randomized elements, especially from children. Belgium famously banned the practice in 2018, and a bill to ban sales of games with loot boxes to minors under the age of 18 was introduced in the U.S. Senate in 2019. From what I understand, last time I heard, this bill did have bipartisan support. The Federal Trade Commission also hosts a public panel on microtransactions in video games late last year, which prompted major console manufacturers Microsoft, Sony, and Nintendo to announce that games with loot boxes will be required to disclose drop rates. Now, I will say, to some extent, I do think this is encouraging, and I think it is good that they are now trying to do a better job in terms of communicating to parents about, if there are in-game purchases like microtransactions or loot boxes. That said, while this certainly is encouraging, I don't think the whole loot box or microtransaction situation is going to go away anytime soon. I don't think this will solve the problem entirely, especially after we saw what happened with the situation with Crash Team Racing, where the game got its rating, but then later Activision decided to implement loot, monetization, like microtransactions and all after the game is rated, and that kind of sort of raises some concerns right there. Though, I mean, what's going to happen? What if a developer sends a game to get its rating, and then down the road it decided to basically add microtransactions? Though, are they going to have to recall the games? Are they going to have to get a re-rating and all that stuff? I mean, during the time when Grand Theft Auto San Andreas came out, when it was discovered the famous so-called hot coffee thing, that game got an AO rating that basically they had to take that scene out and all that stuff. Of course, it was already too late because the game was already out in market and all that stuff. And I'm sure the version with that hot coffee probably sells a lot on eBay and all that stuff. So I would say in regards to this, it's a step in the right direction. It's nice that there's more scrutiny and more awareness about the whole situation with loot boxes and microtransactions in general. But even with all that, I don't think this is going to solve the problem overnight. I still think that you're going to find some developers out there will find a way around the situation, and especially after we saw what Activision pulled with Crash Team Racing. So overall on that part, yes, I think this helps, but I don't think this is the end of the discussion with loot boxes and microtransactions. I think we're far from dealing with this situation. I think this is the kind of situation that will probably go on for a while, though. Okay, we're going to take a quick break, and when we get back, we're going to get to part 2, and this one has to do with a situation in regards of Resident Evil, regarding a possible rumor of Resident Evil 4 to Resident Evil 8. So we'll take a quick break, and we will be right back. Okay, and we are back with part 2 of our My 2 Cent video for this week. And for this one, we're going to be taking a look at Resident Evil, particularly reports about Resident Evil 3, and in terms of its sales, and rumors about Resident Evil, a remake of Resident Evil 4 and Resident Evil 8. Now, the Resident Evil series has sort of gone like up and down for Capcom for a while, though. While the series certainly has its high points, like, to me, I consider Resident Evil 4 the best entry in the Resident Evil series, it certainly has had its low points before. Games like Resident Evil Survivor certainly has not aged well, but then that wasn't a really good game to begin with, though. And Resident Evil Operation Raccoon City, again, not exactly a great game for a lot of people. And then there are, of course, 5 and 6. 5 I really did not enjoy as much, though. I mean, it had its moments, but the forced co-op I thought kind of ruined it a little bit, though. And 6 was panned by a lot of people. I think 6 was an improvement over 5 in some areas, though, but yeah, I can see why not everybody was a fan of that one. So it was kind of great to see the series kind of return to its roots when Resident Evil 7 was released back in 2017, as that game definitely brought back the fear, the horror, and everything else. There were certain things I wasn't a big fan of, such as I think the lack of enemies, and I'm not a big fan of the whole item box thing. I know some people may disagree with me on that, but I just prefer the kind of approach that Resident Evil 4 did in terms of their item management. But either way, it was still a fun game, and a lot of people were happy when that game returned to its roots, though. And then, of course, last year as well, they brought us the remake of Resident Evil 2, a reimagining of the classic 1998 Resident Evil game, but done in for a more modern age, though, running on the famous Resident Evil engine. And that game was fun. It brought back a lot of memories of it. It also introduced some new approaches, such as tyrants, which means you had to take a different approach to dealing with him, and so forth. Some things were brought back from the original one, like you had Campaign A and Campaign B and all that, but either way, it still felt like a brand new game. It was definitely one of my favorite games of last year. And more recently, a remake of Resident Evil 3 just recently came out, which to me, I'm a little surprised that one came out so soon and all that stuff. And while the game certainly has gotten mixed response for some people think it's too short, some people didn't like it and all that stuff, it seems to have sort of done very Capcom right now. In an article first posted on VentureBeat, it reads that, quote, Capcom shipped 2 million copies of Resident Evil 3 in 5 days. The article reads, quote, the Resident Evil franchise continues to deliver strong results for publisher Capcom. In a press release today, the company confirmed that it shipped 2 million copies of Resident Evil 3 Remake in its first 5 days. That includes sales of the survivor horror venture on PS4, Xbox One, and PC, as well as copies shipped to retail. The 2 million number ensures that Resident Evil 3 is another hit, but also puts it just behind the pace of Resident Evil 2 Remake from 2019. Last year, Capcom announced that Remake shipped 3 million copies in its first week. You can also see the slightly dip in launch day numbers on Steam. Resident Evil 2 had 74,000 peak current players on Steam as a debut. The new game, meanwhile, has 60,000 concurred at its peak, though. The critical reception of Resident Evil 3 is cooler than its predecessors. This could account for a moderate downward trend from 2 to 3. But it says that Resident Evil is still selling well, especially on digital platforms. Digital versions of the game account for 50% of sales due to promoting Capcom's digital sales strategy, reads Capcom's press release. This result is shipping passing the 2 million marks 5 days following the release. And the franchise healthy overall. overall, the 2019 version of Resident.to surpassed 6.5 million copies sold, and Resident Evil series is now at 95 million copies sold since 1996. So, despite the mixed response that some people have for Resident Evil 3, it looks like this one is, at least according to Capcom, if we're reading this correctly, this one is still going to be ahead. Which, I mean, you know, like 2, I like the direction they're going with 3, though. I understand 3 is considered by many to be shorter. Not everyone liked it or everything else, but it certainly has its charm. I still have to dig through the game and get a more feel out of it, though, but I do like what I'm seeing so far. I think it follows kind of the same route as Resident Evil 2 in terms of the remake, in terms of, you know, the over-the-shoulder camera and other approaches to it, though, but in its own way, especially with, you know, Nemesis and so forth. But it's good that Resident Evil 3 Remake is doing very well. It doesn't surprise me if we see more remakes down the road of the Resident Evil game, given how well both 2 and right now it looks like 3 are doing as we speak. Speaking of remakes, it seems as though that there's obviously there are reports coming out that we could see that Resident Evil 4 could get the treatment as well. Now, keep in mind, this, along with Resident Evil 8 that I'll be talking about, keep in mind these are rumors, though. So there's no official confirmation at this time, so this information should be taken with a grain of salt. That being said, however, given the success that Resident Evil 2 and 3, the remakes, have done so far, I'm going to lean more towards this being believable, though. I still want to hear official confirmation, but I'm kind of leaning to this being that it could be true. From an article from Games Radar, it reads that, quote, "A Resident Evil 4 remake is coming from Capcom according to reports citing insiders' knowledge. The report, which has emerged on VGC, GEMATSU, and through the Twitter account of freaking horror game leaker Dustin Goldman, all point to Resident Evil 4 remake being on track to arrive in 2022. They also indicate that work on the project has been led by Aulx Studio since the developers opened in 2018, meaning it's already been in the works for a while. Aulx is a new studio led by former Platinum CEO Tatsuya Minani. Apologize, I'm not saying the game, saying the name correctly. Which is also assigned with developers on the Resident Evil 3 remake. Though original Resident Evil 4 director Shinji Mikami is busy working at Ghostwire Tokyo, we haven't heard much about that game. And we also heard the original person who helped on that one sort of left the studio, so who knows what's going on with that game, though. At his Bethesda-owned studio Tango Gameworks, the reports indicate that he's given his unofficial blessing to the Capcom project and even provided a few pointers for its development. Resident Evil 4 first came out for the Nintendo GameCube in 2005. Since then, it has been brought to nearly a dozen other systems. The longest we've ever gone without getting a new way to play Resident Evil 4 was the wait between its Android version in early 2013 and its PS4 and Xbox One version in late 2016. So those were ports and remasters and not true remakes. According to this report, the Resident Evil 4 remake has a larger team and a longer development schedule than both the Resident Evil 2 and 3 remakes, so we should expect an even bigger things. But before that, we should expect to finally see a true sequel to Resident Evil 7. The Resident Evil 8 release date is still reportedly set for 2021. Now, as far as Resident Evil 8 goes, there has been some words about what exactly Resident Evil 8 is. According to the same person who's talked about the Resident Evil 4 rumored remake, there's been some reports about what Resident Evil 8 could be, at least according to what this person's saying. It says, Twitter user Aesthetic Gamer, aka Dust Goldman, had another rumor to share about a new Resident Evil game. This time, calling the in-development project the biggest departure the series has ever taken. According to the rumors, the new Resident Evil game won't be another remake. Instead, it's said to be a perplexed new entry and potentially controversial. So controversial, in fact, the rumor source thinks that a lot of people will be pissed off about it when it's revealed. But this person encourages fans to be open-minded, assuring fans it's a high-quality game. Supposedly, there's been reports about saying that this game could bring Chris Redfield back into it, though, and some of the characters from Resident Evil 7. I've also heard about the item management for Resident Evil 4, and supposedly the whole idea of like hallucinations or witches and all that stuff. Again, with Resident Evil 8, we still have to wait to hear the official confirmation, though. But given the direction 7 went and all that stuff, and where that was going, it wouldn't surprise me if the information about 8 turns out to be true or not. Again, I'm taking a wait-and-see approach, but I wouldn't be surprised if that information turns out to be true. As for 4, I'm kind of mixed on this decision, assuming this rumor is true about remaking Resident Evil 4. As while I'm not against it, I just don't know if they should or not, given that 4, I just still enjoy 4 even after all these years. I mean, yes, some of the mechanics are a little bit dated by today's standards, but they still hold up very well. So I'm a little iffy about the decision on this one, though, but I'm not completely against Resident Evil 4 getting a remake, assuming this rumor is true. So overall, looks like the Resident Evil 3 remake seems to be doing very well in terms of sales-wise. The Resident Evil 4 remake, while rumor, wouldn't surprise me if it's true, although I still think they should do a remake of Code Veronica. And as far as Resident Evil 8 goes, right now it's still rumor, but it wouldn't surprise me if they are working on Resident Evil 8. Hopefully we'll hear more about it and soon, and hopefully we'll know for certain if these rumors are basically true or not. Okay, we're going to take a quick break, and when we get back, we're going to get to part 3, and this one has to do with a very controversial game by the name of Hatred. Is apparently, looks like, unless something changes, looks like it's heading towards the Nintendo Switch. So we'll take a quick break, and we will be right back. Okay, and we are back with part 3 of our My 2 Cent video, and for this one, we're going to be taking a look at, and if I'm assuming I'm reading this correctly, one of the most controversial games of, or at least one that has garnished a lot of attention in a very interesting way, is the game Hatred. Now, when it comes to the rating system as well, for a majority, a lot of developers, though, a lot of them would avoid the rating AO. For those who are not familiar, AO pretty much stands for adults only. This is the equivalent of, when movies get rating. The one that most movie studios, or should I say the majority of them, want to avoid is the so-called NC-17. This is a movie that is this is where you cannot bring anybody under 17. You are not permitted to see this movie whatsoever. The only side note, though, the only movie I know of that got attention, that at least as far as I'm aware of, though, that got the NC-17 rating and was advertised on TV was Showgirls. That was the only one I could think of that got that kind of a rating, though. As far as the AO, though, as far as I'm aware of, though, that one, we know that we've heard policies from Sony, Microsoft, and Nintendo that they will not carry games with AO, the adults only rating, let alone a lot of the retailers, whether it's GameStop, Best Buy, for example, these retailers will not carry the AO, adults only ratings, though. So it's kind of interesting when you hear about the game Hatred, a game that was very controversial when it came out. I think it was 2013. I'm not 100% sure. A game that you played as sort of a mass murderer going on a killing spree. Basically, you want to kill everybody and all that stuff, which it garnished a lot of attention, all right, for the wrong reasons and all that stuff. It even originally came out on Steam, but was pulled. But apparently, they got a backlash from pulling that game, and they put it back on Steam. And I think the head of Steam or Valve, for example, apologized. Though the game got negative reviews, but it certainly has gained a following. So I was kind of surprised to see this when I read this article. I wanted to make sure, was this an April Fool's joke or was this actually real? And it sounds like this is real, though, and it sounds like, if I'm reading this correctly, Hatred, the controversial game, is coming to the Nintendo Switch. In an article from Nintendo Life, it reads that, quote, Aulx Studio Destructive Creations twin-stick murder simulator Hatred is coming to the Nintendo Switch. It has been confirmed. Released in 2015, not 2013, my bad, the game gained notoriety for its glorified violence, something which caused Valve to remove it from their Steam greenlight. It was reinstated along with an apology from Valve's Gable Newell, though, placing you in the role of a cold-blooded killer who is sick and tired of humanity's worthless existence and intends on cleansing the land. Hatred was positioned by its developers as a response to political correctness tended within the gaming industry. Their comments was, quote, these days, when a lot of games are headed to be polite, colorful, politically correct, and trying to be some kind of higher arts rather than just an entertainment, we wanted to create something against trend. We said, yes, it's a game about killing people, and the only reason for the antagonist to doing that is sick stuff in his deep-rooted hatred. The game was awarded the AO Adults Only rating, making it the third video game to receive rating for extreme violence. Manhunt 2 and the unreleased Thrill Kill are the other two. As for the game quality, it currently holds a metric rating of 43 out of 100, with a user score of being 4.7. Game Informer said of the PC version, the game takes itself extremely serious, it has plenty of extreme violent content and murder, but in the end, it ends up feeling more like a camp. GameSpot added, Hatred is too repetitive to be exciting, too dumb to be frightening, too basic for you to feel accomplishing, and its end, too door to be violently catalytic, too self-serious to engender ironic amusement, and yes, still too childish for the matter. Essentially, it's nothing of a game. UK outlet The Guardian perhaps put it best. At worst, it's the game equivalent of a drunken shootout abused from a park bench. At its best, well, the drunken has leaped up and now he's wielding a plastic knife. Maybe not one to get too excited about then. Nintendo does not permit adults-only rated games in the eShop, so it remains to be seen if some content had to be removed. No release date has been given yet either. Now, when I heard that this was, at least according to what the developer said on Twitter, and this is what they said on Twitter, quote, Happy Easter, our beloved fans. Recently, we revealed something regarding the Nintendo Switch. This picture may give you a better idea of what is going on. Are you waiting? And it shows a Nintendo Switch with Hatred, at least a picture of it, on the system. Now, when I heard about this game coming to the Nintendo Switch, I was kind of surprised by this, because while Nintendo certainly has opened up a little bit more in terms of basically allowing, like M-rated games or let developers get away with some of the stuff, pending that they stay within the rating system, like Witcher 3 Wild Hunt is a good example, though. I was a little bit shocked about this game, especially the AO rating. I mean, I was thinking, and when I saw this, and I was thinking in my head, I'm sure a lot of you may or may not agree with me on this, is that in order for a game like this to even make its way onto the Nintendo Switch, I assume the developers had to cut out a lot of the content or cut out the stuff that would have pushed it over to the AO only category, because at least as far as I'm aware of, Nintendo, at least as far as here in the US, I don't think they will allow basically a game that is AO, adults only, to be on their platform though. So I'm thinking the only way this game can even be sold, at least even on the Nintendo eShop, is that they would have to knock it down to an M rated. That means cut out a lot of the stuff, unless there's some loophole or something I'm missing about this. So it's kind of surprising though. As for the game itself, personally, and this is my opinion and my opinion alone, I just want to stress this out though, I think it's poor taste in terms of what the content's all about and all that stuff. I mean, I just think games like Doom Eternal have better taste than what this game is. I think it's just extremely poor taste, and I think it's controversial for the wrong reasons and all that stuff. I'm not against this game existing or anything like that. If this is the kind of game this developer wants to make, I'm not against that. That's fine. I just think it's poor taste and all that stuff, but if that's the kind of game they want to make, that is up to them, and ultimately Nintendo will have a say in whether they are okay with this game to come on their system or not. Obviously, as of right now, they haven't really said anything yet. They haven't said, no, we're denying this game or denying this game from being on the Nintendo Switch. It seems like they're fine with it coming on the Nintendo Switch, which is kind of surprising, but like I said earlier, I'm sure they had to tone down a lot of stuff just to get this game to come onto their system, mostly to tone it down to the point of possibly being an M-rated game and not the AO adults only. So overall, I would say I'm kind of shocked and surprised to see something like this make its way over to the Nintendo Switch. I never thought a controversial game, an extremely controversial game like Hatred, would make its way over to the Nintendo Switch, at least according to what I'm seeing right now, though. Whether that still holds going down the road or not remains to be seen. And if it does come to the Nintendo Switch, if somehow it does, or via the Nintendo eShop or so, I wouldn't be surprised if they had to cut down some of the content just to keep it within the M-rated category to make this game to get this game to even be on the Nintendo eShop. So, like I said, I'm kind of surprised that this looks like it's going to be coming to the Nintendo Switch at all. Okay, we're going to take a quick break. When we get back, we're going to get to part 4. And this one has to do with, sounds as though, if I'm reading this correctly, several games within the Final Fantasy VII universe could be making its way over to the Nintendo Switch. So we'll take a quick break, and we will be right back. Okay, and we are back with part 4 of our My 2 Cent video, and for this one, I want to talk about the rumors that are going around about the Final Fantasy VII, or supposedly a certain version of Final Fantasy VII, coming to the Nintendo Switch under the name Legacy Collection, though, and a little bit of my thoughts about the Final Fantasy VII Remake. So I'm sure you're mostly aware, recently the Final Fantasy VII Remake game came out, though. A reimagining of the classic 1997 Final Fantasy VII that was released back on the original PlayStation. By many, consider that to be a classic, including an infamous scene, including the scene in that one where one of the characters died, and for many that's considered to be like an emotional scene to see something like that happen and so forth. As for my time with the game so far, I would say my time with it has been pretty positive, though. Visually, I would say the game looks nice and everything like that, even running on my base PS4, though. And the combat I'm definitely getting a little bit of a sort of a Kingdom Hearts vibe out of it, although I won't go as far as saying that it plays exactly like Kingdom Hearts. There are some elements that do feel like it is in terms of, the play style, which is sort of feels a little bit more like an action game the way Kingdom Hearts is to a certain degree, like an action RPG. But there are certainly different elements. For one thing, every time you hit, I think the X button, you'll bring up the option to either select, your items or your spells or anything like that. The screen kind of slows down for a bit, though, and you can execute that as well. And each of the characters I played, Barrett and Cloud each have their own different styles. Barrett, uses his gun, or his arm cannon to be exact, to attack certain enemies, especially from the distance. Cloud is more of a close combat kind of a person, though. So, from a gameplay perspective, it is enjoyable, though. I do think you could still play it from like the traditional way, but I'm more of an action RPG person, so I will say I prefer this approach. I will say my impression so far with the game has been pretty positive, though. I like what I'm seeing, though. I still have to dig through it a little bit more. I'm still a little iffy about Square Enix's decision to go the episodic route with this, though. I'm a little bit concerned about this approach, but I will say I'm still pleased with what I'm seeing right now, and I would be open to the idea if they did what they did with Final Fantasy VII Remake so far. I would be open if they do that to, say, like, Final Fantasy VIII. That would be great if they could do something like that. Well, anyway, though, with that game coming out, for those who may not be familiar, there were certainly, given how popular Final Fantasy VII was, there were certainly other games within that universe that came out. I think there was one called Crisis Core that was originally released back on the PSP to, I think, Derive Cerberus, if I apologize, I'm saying naming correctly, that starred one of the characters, I think Vince, that was in the Final Fantasy VII game, as sort of like acting like a true sequel after the events of the Final Fantasy VII movie, Avert Children. Again, I apologize, I'm not saying the name correctly, though. So recently, it turns out to be that with Final Fantasy VII already out, it looks like, though, we might be seeing the collections of some of these games. And what's interesting is that this collection supposedly is reported to be coming to the Nintendo Switch. Now, keep in mind, though, these are rumors, like the Resident Evil one that I mentioned, so I do think a grain of salt needs to be taken, though. And while I do think it is possible Square Enix could be doing these games for the Nintendo Switch, I'm not 100% sold on this one yet. In fact, I think the Resident Evil 4 rumor, the remake, that one, I think that one is, I think that's more believable than this rumor, though, but anything can happen. We could see. Anything will happen, and we'll see about that. Well, anyway, in an article from Game Rant, they are reporting that, quote, a new rumor making the round online claims that Square Enix is preparing a so-called Final Fantasy VII Legacy Collection for the Switch. The article reads, quote, with the long-awaited Final Fantasy VII Remake released to rave reviews and supposedly doing well in sales from what I've been hearing, interest in the Final Fantasy VII story is at an all-time high. Many fans know that the story extends beyond the original game with games like Crisis Core, Final Fantasy VII, and Derive Cerberus, Direceberus. Apologize if I'm not saying the name correctly. But those games are only available on older platforms and not easy to access the most. However, if a recent rumor is to be believed, that could change in the near future. A Reddit user going by the name of Square Enix Leaker 0404 claims that something called Final Fantasy Legacy Collection is in the works for the Nintendo Switch. Apparently, Final Fantasy VII Legacy Collection will consist of Crisis Core, Derive Cerberus, and Before Crisis. The supposed leaker doesn't clarify if the original Final Fantasy VII will be included in the bundle, though it would make sense given its title and the fact the game is already available on the Nintendo eShop via and on the Switch via the Nintendo eShop, although supposedly PlayAsia is selling a copy where it will have the original Final Fantasy VII and Final Fantasy VIII, though I believe they are doing that, though. While it's certainly possible that Square Enix plans on remastering Crisis Core and Derive Cerberus for modern consoles, fans should take this information with a big grain of salt, as there are a number of things that makes it suspicious. The biggest issue is that no other platforms beside the Switch are mentioned, which would be bizarre and inconsistent. Another issue is that it seems highly unlikely that Before Crisis has a chance of getting a port, though. Just for clarification, a little bit of a side note, the post reads according to, and this was from a post on Reddit, it reads, quote, I have a source who found out recently that some Final Fantasy VII games will be coming to the Nintendo Switch. Unfortunately, the Final Fantasy VII Remake is not one of them, though. Supposedly that's still exclusive for the PS4. Whether that changes or not, who knows? And we don't know if the game will ever make it to the Nintendo Switch. There could be technical issues. However, though, since the Switch supports Unreal Engine 4 and Final Fantasy VII Remake runs on Unreal Engine 4, who knows? Anyway, the post continues. However, the inclusion of games will be Crisis Core, Dirge of Cerberus, and Before Crisis Core. All of them will be announced pretty soon. This will be the first time Crisis Core or Dirge of Cerberus are released on non-Sony platform. Expect more information soon. That part is from the Reddit post. The article continues, however, it reads that for the unintended, Before Crisis was an action RPG prequel to Final Fantasy VII that launched all the way back in 2004 for the Japanese mobile device. Before Crisis had a multiplayer element to it, but its online servers were shut down in 2018, and it was never released outside of Japan. Considering this, it seems highly unlikely that Square Enix will be re-releasing the games on modern platform. However, perhaps the story could be collaborate in a theoretical Final Fantasy Legacy Collection bundle. After all, that's what Square Enix did when it came to bring the mobile Kingdom Hearts titles to modern platform. Alternatively, maybe Square Enix will remaster the games without its multiplayer elements. However, it seems like it would amount to a lot of extra time that wouldn't necessarily be worth for the development team. If the supposed Final Fantasy Legacy Collection is real, then fans can expect more information soon, according to this leaker. Nintendo is rumored to be hosting a Nintendo Direct in June, so maybe we'll learn more about that. Until an official announcement is made, though, fans should be treated to this as an unverified rumor. So, to me, I am taking this one with a huge grain of salt. While it would be interesting to see some of these games come to the Nintendo Switch, I'm taking a cautious approach on this one. Like I said, I think the Resident Evil 4 remake seems more believable than this. However, I wouldn't be against these games coming to the Nintendo Switch. The Crisis Core, or the Before Crisis, that I think originally from the PSP. I mean, they could remaster that, give it a fresh coat of paint. I could see that coming to the Nintendo Switch. Or Dirge of Cerberus. This one was sort of a third-person shooter, though, that came out on the PlayStation 2. Although when it launched in Japan, there were certain technical issues, or the aiming or the way the combat was set up wasn't exactly perfect. I think they fixed that, for the US version and so forth. So I could technically see some of these games coming over. Not sure about the Before Crisis one. That might be an issue and all that stuff. I mean, if Final Fantasy VII Remake is not coming to the Nintendo Switch, if it turns out to be true, and honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if that is the case, but like I said, the game supposedly runs on Unreal Engine 4, and since the Switch supports Unreal Engine 4, anything could happen, though. I wouldn't be surprised if they bring these over as sort of like since we're not bringing Final Fantasy VII Remake, we'll bring these over to the Nintendo Switch. Whether this turns out to be true or not remains to be seen. We'll have to wait and see, but for right now, overall, I would say I'm not against these games set within the Final Fantasy VII universe coming to the Nintendo Switch, but right now, I am treating this as a rumor, and like I said before, I just get the feeling that the Resident Evil 4 remake rumor seems, in my view, more believable than this one does. Okay, we're going to take a quick break, and when we get back, we're going to get to part 5, and this one has to do with supposedly a rumor in regards of the, supposedly someone found some interesting information in the update of 10.0 for the Nintendo Switch that could point to a new Switch in some ways, in some form. So we'll take a quick break, and we will be right back. Okay, and we are back with part 5 of our My Two Cent video, and for this one, I want to take a look at what apparently seems to be rumors going around of what seems to be found in this 10.0 update that has came out from the Nintendo Switch. Now, obviously, most of you are aware, especially for those who own a Nintendo Switch, know that just recently, Nintendo just released a new update for the Nintendo Switch entitled 10.0. And now most of the update seems to point to the fact that you can now bookmark news items, though, in terms of, if they release information about certain stuff and all that stuff for your games. They also announced that you could transfer, supposedly, software data between the system's memory and an SD card. That means users can now transfer downloadable software update data and DLCs from the system memory to an SD card and vice versa. They also point out that notes, save data, and some updates cannot be transferred to an SD card. You now have the option of supposedly remapping the control buttons, though, and you could save up to 5 configurations, though. I'm reading this off of a site called Nintendo Wire. I just want to let you know about that. And supposedly add a new selection in users for play activity where you could display or delete. And they've also added some new icons for Animal Crossing New Horizons. So if you have, your icon, you want to pick a character from Animal Crossing New Horizon, you could do that. So, some of it, the remapping, the transferring save data is nice, though. Some of it others may not be a big deal, although I think the big one that a lot of us would love to see, and I'm pretty much sure there's plenty of you out there, would be folders. I really think, Nintendo, you really need to release and make an update so we can use folders to help organize any of the games, particularly if you're the kind of person that buys games digitally and downloads and all that stuff. Well, interestingly enough, a report started to come out that apparently some data miners have found some interesting information that could point to another Switch and all that stuff, or a newer version of the Nintendo Switch. According from the same article, this is from Nintendo Wire, there are reports coming out that says, quote, "Last night, the Nintendo Switch firmware saw a big update to version 10.0.0, and it likes a button remapping and a few new avatars options. Hidden within its files, though, is something a lot more exciting. As data miner Mike Heskins reported, 3 of the 5 new DRM profiles seems to be allocated for a new hardware model label called NXABCD. Even more interesting, Heskins goes on to say there's evidence of a second display potentially being involved. Given Nintendo's history of using 2 screens with the DS and Wii U having unique implements of the concept, there's a percent that for such an approach being taken with a new Switch model, but we'll have to wait and see. For those who may not remember, the Nintendo president Fukawa, FURUKAWA, already stated earlier this year that the company has no plans to release a new Switch model in 2020, so it could be a while before we see any information. Supposedly, if this person is, if I can find, no, unfortunately I cannot find it. So it's kind of interesting to hear this, though, about supposedly this new model and all that stuff, and possibly this second screen. If this is true, though, that they are adding a secondary display, though, assuming this is all true, let's be clear, this is all rumor and all that stuff, I'm very curious to see how this is going to work. If this second screen happens, is this only going to work for like when you're playing your Switch in portable mode or anything like that? Or are we looking at possibility of what many would assume that this could be, the next Nintendo Switch, a Switch Pro or Switch.to and all that stuff? Right now, I think it's up in the air exactly what this is at this time. We don't have really concrete information, and right now, it is considered a rumor. And as I mentioned, the president of Nintendo recently announced that there are no plans to release a new Switch model in 2020. Maybe 2020 or maybe in 2021 or 2022, might be. We could see something like that, but right now they're saying not this year and all that. So but still, it is kind of interesting, and I'm curious what this means. What they mean about this second screen. I mean, are we talking about, hey, you can also now play 3DS games or DS games? Maybe it's just designed for just the backwards compatibility of, hey, you could play these games now on your Nintendo Switch. There's always that possibility, but who knows? So overall, I would say it's interesting. I am curious to see how a second display on the Nintendo Switch would work, but like anything, it is sort of I'm going to treat it as a rumor for now, so we'll have to wait and see until we hear sort of an official confirmation and all. Okay, we're going to take a quick break, and when we get back, we're going to get to part 6, and this one has to do with supposedly some interesting information in regards to the PS5 and how this their launch lineup for the PS5, or how they're going to launch their system, is going to be different this year. So we'll take a quick break, and we excuse me, and we will be right back. Okay, and we are back with our 6th and final part of our My 2 Cent video, and for this one, this has to do with in regards of the PS5 or PlayStation 5. Now, as far as what the system looks like and all that stuff, there hasn't been really information of what exactly the system looks and all that stuff. All we got is information what the system is going to do, and recently we saw what the PS5 controller now called the DualSense looks like. And while I will say the design looks odd to a certain degree in regards to the controller, though, I am curious to try the controller out and so forth. But one interesting thing that I've been monitoring is about when the system will launch and whether or not Sony is going to be able to launch the system, though, especially ranging from the whole situation with the coronavirus to, of course, the price point and so forth. Well, now, supposedly some information has come out, and that it looks as though that while the system is going to still aiming for that holiday launch, along same with the Xbox Series X, though, it looks like there have been some behind-the-scenes situation ranging from the price point that may or may not sit well with people to the way Sony was planning to originally announce the PS5, which obviously, you know, with the whole coronavirus situation, that has kind of really thrown a major wrench in a lot of things, though. In an article from Forbes magazine, it recently writes, quote, "The PS5 launch is coming, even if we haven't heard too much about it. A new report from Bloomberg seems to reveal some interesting news about Sony's upcoming console and a launch that will necessarily look a lot different from the PS4 launch. Any way you swing it." The report goes into just how much details. It reads that, quote, "First off, the company promotion plan has been thrown into a loop due to the social distancing and the coronavirus. The company recently revealed its DualSense controller out of nowhere and is now reorienting, if I'm saying it correctly, towards revealing the console without a traditional press conference. Coronavirus is also likely to affect launch software as the entire industry deals with adapting to work from home. But the takeaway from that report says that the PS5 launch will come with a more limited stock than the PS4. Sony is worried that a high price tag might turn some consumers off, and so the company is planning on producing 5 to 6 million units for its fiscal year ending in March 2021, down to the 7.5 million units the PS4 sold during its first 2 quarters. The PS4 was also sold out and difficult to find during that period. That's because the company is reporting the struggle to keep the price down. As for the price, the report says that most developers are expecting it between $499 to $599. In other words, $500 to $550, which is what the conventional wisdom around the internet says as well. Components are expensive, and limited production in Chinese factories hasn't helped anything. A high-priced console could be even trickier proposition. I'm sorry if I'm saying that correctly. If we launch into a major worldwide recession, where many people will be limited on how much they can spend on extras like a new game console. The company is reported on planning on cutting the price of the PS4 and PS4 Pro in order to use them as bridge machines to get new people on board with the ecosystem, which is not entirely dismissive from Microsoft's plans, which involves a new budget machine called Lockhart. But both the PS5 and Xbox Series X are expensive machines, which we can already see from the already revealed specs. Most expect that to keep the final sticker price. High, but one analyst suspect that both might come in the $450 range, which would mean selling at a loss. That is not unheard of in a world where video games are sell at a loss is easier to do in 2020, where digital storefronts of subscription service make it easier for the platform holder to make money after the initial purchases. So basically what this Forbes article is basically talking about is that a couple of things. Obviously with the whole coronavirus, though, they have to now rethink how they're going to reveal the system and all that stuff. Obviously the original plan was to have a press release and so on, but obviously that's not going to happen though, so they may do, like a digital event to finally show off the PS5 and all that stuff. It's also possible that obviously the launch lineup for the PS5 is going to be, it's going to be a little bit different. It is possible because a lot of developers or the industry working at the whole work at home kind of situation. It means that it's possible that some of these games may not be ready for launch. We don't know for certain if that's the case, but we'll have to wait and see on that. However, the price point that could be the biggest issue. The fact that it could cost, there's a possibility that the new system could cost up to say $500 to $550. That could turn some people off. That could be a problem if you're trying to convince people to buy a new console. And considering that it looks more and more likely, although anything could change, but it seems looking more and more likely that we're heading into a recession, that might turn some people off of considering even buying a PS5 or Xbox Series X at this time, though. They may choose to hold off and wait. Not to mention, it looks as though that they plan to basically not release a whole lot, not manufacture a lot of the systems, though. They are looking to manufacture 5 to 6, so they're planning not. That means that it's going to be hard to find one, possibly, not to mention, which means that don't be surprised if you see on eBay someone selling a PS5 and selling it at an outrageous price. I mean, we've seen that before. We've seen that with the PS4. We've seen that with the Nintendo Switch at the time, though, although Nintendo was kind of struggling to try to get more Switches out and all that stuff recently, though. So it doesn't surprise me, a lot of the stuff, such as changing the way they announced it and all that stuff, and the change to the launch title. The price point, I feel, is going to be the one that it could be difficult for some people. Some people may be okay with this, but there may be a hard time trying to convince people to shell out $550 or $500 for a new console. So overall, it doesn't surprise me that because of the situation with the coronavirus, Sony has to change some of their stuff from announcing it to the possibility that some of their launch lineups might be impacted or might be delayed or may not show up on day one. The price point, I think, is going to be an issue to some people. It might turn some people off. And like I said earlier, given the fact that we may be heading towards a situation where we are more than likely going into a recession, that might prevent some people from buying a new system at this time. We'll have to wait and see how things play out during the holidays. Maybe what I said may not happen at all. Maybe things will go smoother by the time we hit the holidays, though. But I wouldn't be surprised if this happens. I wouldn't be surprised if some people, that Sony reports that the PS5 didn't take off in the level that they wanted to because of all that stuff. But maybe they have a way around it. Like this article says, they could be doing subscription or digital storefronts to make up. They might drop the price to $450, which means they may have to bite the bullet and sell it at a loss. But we'll have to wait and see. But overall, I'm not surprised about given the current situation, though. But we'll see what happens as the months play by, and hopefully the PS5 can do well despite the current situation, what's going on, around the world and all that. Okay, this concludes this My 2 Cent video for this week. And again, these are my opinion. What are yours? What are your thoughts about the ESRB ranging from still working despite the situation with the coronavirus to the whole adding in-game purchases on the labels for games that have microtransactions and loot boxes? Are you glad that the ESRB is not doing what the CERO is doing in Japan? Do you think this means that we'll see more games coming out and not have to wait to be delayed to get their rating and all that stuff? And do you think this new in-game label thing will it help or won't really do anything in regards to the whole microtransaction, loot boxes, and all that stuff? What are your thoughts about the situation with Resident Evil, though? Are you pleased to hear that Resident Evil 3 Remake is doing well? Do you think it's doing okay? Are you worried that because didn't sell as much as Resident Evil 2, do you think it's a flop, or do you think that's not really a big issue or anything like that? And do you believe these rumors about about Resident Evil 8 and the Resident Evil 4 remake, though? Do you think Capcom should remake Resident Evil 4, or do you think they should just leave that one alone? What are your thoughts about the story about Hatred, the very controversial game coming to the Nintendo Switch? Do you think Nintendo... Are you okay with this game coming to the Nintendo Switch? Do you think Nintendo will prevent this game from coming to the Switch, or do you think you believe that they're not going to even bother with it and let this game come to the Nintendo Switch? What are your thoughts about the Final Fantasy VII Legacy Collection? This rumor about these collections of games set within the Final Fantasy universe coming to the Nintendo Switch. Do you think this rumor is true? Do you think this is going to happen? Do you think it's not going to happen? And if these rumors are true, do you think it will be just for the Switch, or do you think it will come to other systems as well? And have you picked up the Final Fantasy VII Remake, and have you enjoyed it, though? What are your thoughts about this 10.0 update and supposedly report about sort of like a second screen for the Nintendo Switch? Do you think this rumor is true? Do you don't think it is true? Do you think this points to a Switch Pro or a Switch.to? Or do you think it's just nothing more than just sort of like just an add-on for the current Nintendo Switch, possibly for the Switch Lite as well? And what are your thoughts about the PS5? Are you kind of surprised are you shocked that they're not going to do a press release because of the whole coronavirus? Or are you not surprised at all? Are you concerned the fact that they're not going to make as much Switches? Much PS5s at launch? Do you think that's going to be a concern for people to pick up? And do you think the price point of $499 or $549, do you think that is too much? Or do you think that seems to be, you still think this is going to be a reasonable price? Do you agree with what I said in this video? Do you disagree? Do you have a difference of opinion? As always, sound off on the comment section below. Let me know what you think. And if you like this video, then hit the like button. I would appreciate it. And I hope you do subscribe to my YouTube channel. If you do, make sure you hit the bell icon for notifications of any new videos I put up. Also, feel free to share this video if you want to, and feel free to donate to my channel if you like. You can do it through PayPal me or Patreon. Links will be in the description of this video. And I will see you again next time when I do another video. Hopefully that'll be soon. Until then, from Southern California, I wish you all a good day then. Bye!